I'd like to invite up our guests for tonight, Lois Alamonte, talking about the Convention of States. Let's hear it.
My name is Lois Alamonte. I'm representing New York Convention of States. I'm actually a state director right now. I am going to be moving out of state, I have to tell you, so there will be, but there's another state director. We have two for that reason. We have quite a good group in New York, and I'm also the district captain for 106, which I believe some of you are in. How many people out there have any idea what Convention of States is? Okay, so some of you do. I'd say the majority probably. It's something new. There's a very short video that gives a great overview, and I think that looking at something is always really helpful, so I'm going to ask to have that video played, and then we'll talk about it. I could give more information, take questions, and we'll go from there.
The United States Constitution was written to form a more perfect union that would enable checks and balances to prevent a bloody revolution from being a necessary measure to abolish tyranny. Excellent though it was, Colonel George Mason feared the national government might one day end in a tyrannical aristocracy. The rights of the people needed to be secured against potential corruption at the national level. One of the solutions the framers decided upon can be found in Article 5, which gives state legislators the authority to call a convention that bypasses federal legislators to amend the Constitution. That gives we the people the opportunity to make some long overdue structural adjustments. Maybe term limits would be a good place to start. Here's how the process works. Citizens request their state legislators to pass a bill called an application with operative language identical in each state. These legislators of the states then pass the application. Generally, only a simple majority is needed. Congress shall, by law, call a convention of the states as soon as it receives applications from 2/3 of the state legislatures. That's 34 states. Delegates chosen by the state legislatures attend the convention. Each state only gets one vote at the convention, but they can send as many delegates to represent the state as they so choose. Amendments are proposed, debated, and voted upon at the convention. Finally, ratification takes place in the states. Each amendment must be ratified by 3/4 of the states in order to become part of the U.S. Constitution. But what about a runaway convention?
Come.
Let's get a reality check. Like constitutional law scholar Robert G. Nadelson says, there are far more political and legal constraints on a runaway convention than on a runaway Congress. The convention delegates, also called commissioners, are bound to the will of their state legislatures. If they don't vote as their states demand, they get recalled. They might even get sent to prison. Furthermore, a full 3/4 of the state legislatures, we're talking 38 state legislatures, must ratify each and every amendment in order for it to become part of the U.S. Constitution. Even Alexander Hamilton and Abraham Lincoln, who favored national government, emphasized that Article 5 gives states authority over the national government. Hamilton writes that national rulers have no option upon the subject. The words of Article 5 are peremptory. Congress shall call a convention. And Lincoln says the convention mode seems preferable in that it allows amendments to originate with the people themselves. Article 5 Convention of the States is a safe route to stopping federal overreach. Civilizations rise and fall. Let's be a civilization that saw the cycle of collapse coming and broke it.
Okay, that gives you a good little overview of what it's about. I didn't know that such a thing as a second way to propose amendments even existed back in around 2016 when I first joined. I heard about it through Mark Levin. I then read his book called The Liberty Amendments. And interestingly, Mark Levin wasn't always convinced about the idea of having a convention of states. Anybody who's listened to him, though, knows he's extremely well-read and educated, and constitutional law is his thing, and he was convinced that that was the way to go, and his book is a great way to learn more. More specifically, first of all, 19 states have already passed. We went from 15 to 19 very quickly once legislatures in the states started getting underway again in a more normal manner with the COVID nonsense. There were several states that were ready to get in on it. So we need 34, and we're really getting, really getting there because it's happening quickly. There's a few more that could pass this year. So why are we doing this? Well, of course, the federal government, we believe, has gotten way too big. The people no longer have much of a say. And lo and behold, Article 5 in the Constitution, there from the get-go, not an amendment, but Article 5 is a way for states to propose amendments. And I do want to mention one little story. George Mason is the person that brought up the idea of having this second way to propose amendments. And interestingly, you probably know how bitterly so many things were debated in the Constitution, and then the Federalist Papers talk about many of those. When George Mason brought up the idea that, gee, what if the government gets too big? They're not going to make amendments to limit themselves. Everyone agreed. There was really almost no debate. So it just goes to show how much faith they had in that idea. I think they'd be shocked beyond belief that we haven't used this, not to mention shocked at where we are, but that we might have been able to put some of this off if we'd gotten in there sooner. The resolution in New York, which has to aggregate and which is the same in every state, brings up three main areas that amendments can be brought up regarding. One is term limits. That's probably the most popular and the one that is the most easily explained. That would have to be debated. The details would have to be debated. Are we going to term limit the Congress? Are we going to also term limit the Supreme Court? What are those limits going to be, et cetera? So they have to discuss this. That's what the convention's all about. It's a big meeting to discuss the details and then vote, get a majority to vote it out of convention, at which point it has to be passed the same way any amendment ever had to be passed, 3/4 of the state. So it's a very high bar. The other two areas, which are more broad, have to do with fiscal restraints and government overreach. So those are big areas, but you can only imagine the different things that could be proposed that we sorely need. But I think, personally, term limits is a good place to start because that would take care of some of the others automatically if you don't have people getting into government just to become millionaires and billionaires. So with that, let me ask for questions. Yes?
Will the states know what is up for debate before we send our legislators or our delegates there?
Yes, because it has to be in those categories. The resolution specifies those three areas. So they stay broad until they actually get into convention. Then they pick out of but it has to, like somebody can't come up with something that has nothing to do with any of those three main ideas. Yes?
How many states are already signed up?
19 have passed completely, and it doesn't have to happen within a certain period of time. Some of them go back quite a few years. Some of them just passed this year. And unless they have a sunset clause, it can go on for years and years. And there might be a few states that have sunset clauses, but they're working on getting those taken off. Of course, the goal is to not have it in the first place. Yes?
Isn't the downside of this much higher than the upside? And I say that because look at the tyranny, the tyrants, and what they're doing with COVID. Once you open up the Constitution for change, aren't we opening ourselves up for more tyranny?
Personally, no. I mean, that's the runaway convention idea. We're not opening up the Constitution. We're proposing amendments. We're not having a constitutional convention to rewrite the Constitution. It's not opening it up. It's just saying, we want to discuss some amendments that the federal government won't bring up on their own. So just take term limits as one, because it's the easiest one to grab hold of. It goes to convention, people talk about it. They can't decide to bring up something that has absolutely nothing to do with any of these things, like term limits, for example. They can't, they would literally get recalled if they tried to just bring something out of the blue. Like some people say, oh, they're going to take away our Second Amendment. That's not there. There's nothing in there.
What are the three areas?
Term limits, fiscal restraints, or basically ideas like balancing the budget in a way that would work without just taxing us to death, and government overreach. So all these non-governmental entities that make laws, for example, they're not supposed to. They're regulatory agencies, but they actually end up making laws. The legislature is supposed to make the laws, and somehow that's not what's happening anymore.
So the Convention of States, if it's opened up, it's limited to just those things?
Yes, absolutely.
How is it limited?
That's what's in the resolution. That's how the Article 5 works. I'm going to play a video at the end that's going to answer these a lot better than I can, because Rob Natelson, who is the expert, beyond all experts, on Article 5 law, gives a little presentation. But basically, that's how it works. I mean, think of any committee. Say you're on a committee in a company to, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something, not being in that kind of business, but you're on a committee to propose.
Company picnic.
Okay, thank you, a company picnic. Well, there's X amount of people on the committee, there's a committee chairman, and somebody comes in and says, I don't want to talk about the picnic. I want to talk about firing everybody in that department. They're not doing their job. Well, I know that doesn't fall under legal issues like a Convention of States does, but it's basically, that's what's written. This is the resolution kind of spells that out, and it's a little lengthy to read, and I meant to make copies, but I will leave it for anybody that wants to look at it. And this is exactly what you're going to have in every state and in both legislatures of every state. I can tell you that right now, because I'm most familiar with the numbers in 106, and there are there's over 850 petition signers in 106. That's a good number of people. And if you go to your assembly person and have that many people, you have some sway. We're nonpartisan, so I can't go out and politic as a Convention of States person. I can as myself, but I have some power in that I can very legally let everyone in the district know, okay, it's time for get out the vote, and these people are in favor and these people are not. And those 800 some odd people hopefully will take that into account when they go to the polls. So we do have, even though we're nonpartisan, we do have some influence.
So this resolution is the same resolution in all 19
Yes, they have to be identical or very, very close to identical, because otherwise they don't aggregate. That's the technical word. They have to aggregate. Yes.
So these three resolutions, the term limits, the fiscal restraint, and government overreach, these are the only topics that can be considered for a constitutional amendment?
In this Convention of States. I mean, there could be, if another group wants to start a Convention of States for some other area, they can. This is ours. There have been some out there for just term limits. We felt it was best to do more than that.
So you guys started the ball rolling.
In this case, yes.
And have gone after the other states to cooperate and join.
Right. Well, it's a national organization. So it's not that New York started it and it spread. We're part of it.
How often do you call for these resolutions? I mean, every so many years, somebody decides we should have a resolution for something?
No, this is something in the Constitution, and it's left up to us. I mean, in all these, in the decades and centuries, we haven't had this happen, which is kind of crazy, because look where we are. So this is a big grassroots movement.
So we've never had a convention of states ever?
No, we've had conventions amongst states for other reasons, but not for proposing amendments, and that's why Rob Natelson talks about, we have experience with interstate conventions, but not specifically using Article 5.
So in comparison to the constitutional convention that, like, most states, I think, have every 10 years, right? Where they re-examine their state constitution. This is basically sort of similar, but for a specific thing, and not on that 10 year.
Right. It's not a constitutional convention, and I know exactly what you mean with the state, because everybody got us mixed up that year when we went, to Albany. This is not the whole Constitution. It's just proposing amendments, and they have to be specific to those 3 areas. Yes.
Isn't that true? I just finished doing the Biblical Citizenship Constitution
Yes.
with Rick Green.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this Article 5 was in the original,
Yes.
the original writings of the constitutionalists, of the founding fathers,
Yes.
who worked endlessly with great detail, and this was brought in, and they tried to cover every avenue to protect our freedom as a nation. And this Article 5, from my understanding, has never been called or used since the Founding Fathers.
Right.
1776.
Right. Now, Article 5, just so you know this, Article 5 covers both ways that that an amendment can be made. So the way that we're used to is Congress proposes it. But this is where the states do. And as I said, George Mason is the one who said, wait a minute, what do we do if the federal government gets out of hand and doesn't want to do what we want to do? They get too powerful, and that's exactly the situation.
So what we're talking about now is having New York State become a part of the, however many to get up to 34.
Yes, we would like to be one of them.
The question is, who would be the ones that would decide to vote to say, yes, you want to go? Is that the United States senators and United States congressmen?
No, it's not. It's our state representatives.
So it's a state representative?
Yes, it's our state representatives. So that's why we go to, and we break it down by districts, by state districts, and we go to them and we talk to them about it. A lot of our state people have no idea the power that they have, because they don't even know that this exists until we tell them. They should all know now, because we've been up to Albany and we've been to many offices, and they should all know about it, but it's a big deal.
I know you said you're nonpartisan, but I'm wondering if you're seeing one party represented more than another in the legislatures of the 19 states that have signed on so far?
Yeah, there's no doubt that it's a more conservative idea. So even though it's not party, there are the people that like big government aren't going to be as interested. Those of us who want to limit it are the ones who are interested. However, we are making traction in blue states as well as red states.
Let's say that you said there was no time limit. So if the state says they want to participate in this, but their legislature is flipped to the other party, can they back out as that happens?
No, because it takes 2/3 of the states to call the convention. But even, say New York isn't one of them, but it happens. We still send people. We still get a vote. And each state gets one vote. You can send many delegates, but one vote per state. So I often tell people, New York's not the easiest state, no doubt about it. But we need to educate people. The more people that know about it, it's grassroots. It's from the bottom up. We have to demand what we want. Yes?
Yeah, it was a follow-on to that question. New York is just, so it's like the blue trifecta. I mean, we're strangled. So it's, I'm just wondering, in terms of other states that have signed on, are there any that are as blue as New York? And my second question is fraud, waste, and abuse anywhere in what you're proposing, or is there like embedded in the language?
I'm sorry, what was the second question?
Fraud, waste, and abuse by the state government.
Fraud, waste, and abuse.
Oh, by the federal government?
Well, I guess
Well, yeah, well, we're talking about federal amendments, so yeah, you could see that under, fiscal restraints, certainly. And the other question is, the states that have passed so far have been more so red states, but there has been some traction in Massachusetts where they've actually gotten out of committee. We haven't gotten out of committee in New York yet, and that's our goal right now. We were really set back. We had a lot going on, and we were really set back by the 2 years going on, 3 that we can't go to Albany, but we've done a lot locally. And we are beginning to get some Democrat co-sponsors. And that's what's important. I think that, again, I think it comes down to people. It's a tough state. We know what Albany's about and who's running Albany. But we can see that change. I mean, things have gotten so bad in a lot of these states that I think that as people at the grassroots level see what's going on, and if their representatives really want to represent them and want to stay in office, it's time, they've got to, at some point, listen to us. Yes?
I'm just trying to make sense of it. So our goal is to get a certain amount of assemblymen and senators in New York to go with this?
Right. We have to be able to vote it. It's in a committee in each house, the Assembly and the Senate of New York, and we haven't been able to get it out of committee.
Do you have anyone?
But we've yes, we have to have a sponsor to even have it brought up, and we've had sponsors every year, and we have more co-sponsors this year than we've ever had. Mainly because we've been having to work locally, and so many more people have gone to their local, rather than worrying about aggregating in Albany. But again, it's a very blue state, and we have to get the districts, we have to get we have to get it out of committee, we have to get more people, and that may come down to what happens in the election. So we have to think that way too in a state like this, even though, again, we're not partisan, but we can let people know who's in favor and who isn't. Yes? Yes.
I walked in so late.
That's okay.
My husband is way for it, and I questioned, well, how is it different from the kind of, or the basic system of what we have that's been corrupted? So how does the Convention of States differ from what we got now, if you could distill that? And what kind of protections do we have that those that are going to represent us aren't going to go the same route?
Well, and we'll still show the video at the end because a lot of that has to do with the concern of a runaway convention, but we are talking about proposing amendments. So as far as, all the corruption that's going on, we're trying to propose amendments that will help take care of some of that corruption, like term limits could go a long way, and fiscal restraints, taking power back more locally takes power away from the people that are abusing it. So that's a general answer. As far as other issues that can happen, I think the video will probably be more helpful. Yes?
On your website, it says like one of your 3 goals, the language it uses is to limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. I wonder if you can elaborate on what that means.
That is one of the more general ones, which is, and one of the things I brought up before were, for instance, there are some crazy things that go on where the federal government, for instance, uses the Commerce Clause to dabble in just about anything. If they could come up with a blade of grass that has to do with commerce, they will say you can't do this because of the Commerce Clause. It's gotten way, way over the edge. So something like that could be something you could say, okay, we're going to take the Commerce Clause and we're going to make an amendment that clarifies something in that will make it not, that's overreach. They've just used that for crazy stuff. I hope that's helpful. I could be more specific. There's some specific things that have happened that I don't have it right in front of me. I'm not going to remember all the names, but where, a farmer was told that he could only grow so much crop, and even if it was for himself, He wanted to grow more so that he'd have his own seed, and he wasn't allowed to do that because they said even though it's for him, it's still going to affect interstate commerce because of what isn't going to be grown somewhere else. I mean, it's so way out. So that's, an idea of how that could work.
Where does Citizens United fit in?
We just had a conversation about that. Citizens United is attempting to also use Article 5. But there's a little bit of debate. We had this conversation just last night, and actually, somebody was going to look into it before our next meeting. We have weekly meetings, leadership meetings in Convention of States in New York. Because someone said, well, they're not really using Article 5, but I don't know how they could be trying to propose an amendment any other way. So they are, and that's one of our arguments with some of the legislators that say, oh, we don't want to do this, we don't want to do this. A lot of them that give us excuses have signed up for that. So, for Citizens United. So, if it's the same idea. Article 5 convention is an Article 5 convention. Yes?
Big fan of Mark Levin. He's gotten pretty wishy-washy over the whole COVID thing and vaccines the last year or so, so I kind of tuned him out a little bit. That said, he's been talking about Convention of States for 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
Maybe longer. And we're still at 19, well, that's where we're at, 19. So how long has it taken us to get to 19? And what are the chances of us ever getting to 34?
I think the chances are increasing greatly. Reason being that things have gotten so bad. I can tell you that when, after this last election, we just started to get bombarded with people that wanted to get involved, that wanted to do something, and not just sit back anymore. And after the first, I'm trying to remember the specifics, I think it was one of the early speeches about furthering the lockdowns and mandating, we literally, our system crashed. We had so many people signing the petition. So I think, unfortunately, like many things in life, things had to get very bad before they took off. Because we passed like 4 states, boom, boom, boom this year. And I think it can continue to go that way. But there is no limit. I mean, I could say I'd love to say, oh, it's going to happen in the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. But even if it happens in 5 years, at least we're doing something, and it will happen. I do believe it will happen, and I think that, there are more. Most states have at least got resolutions in their houses. So, anyhow, yes.
So in terms of what we can do with respect to this, as far as advocacy goes, it would be the ask is, or the encouragement is to go to our state assembly reps and our state senators with as many people as possible. Because, I mean, I live in Ulster County, and our state senator would probably be interested, but certainly not our state assembly.
Yeah, I have some things in the back, and there are petitions to sign, or I have a bunch of these cards, and take a bunch and give them to your friends, because this gives you the website. You can also sign the petition there, and there's even the scanners on the back. If you sign the petition, you will automatically, or almost automatically, we actually do it personally, so it's not the moment you sign, but you will get an email. It'll give you the names of your representatives. It'll give you the information that you need to make calls, to email them, etc. If you get on the website, you'll get all that information. I have some of my cards back there. You can call me, and all of our material is very helpful and has the links. So I would say there's a lot of material there. There aren't that many people here, so please use it, take it in the back table. I'm going to ask, we could, if there's time, we could do more questions, but I want to play that other video, because I think it's really helpful it's a little more complex, but I think it's really helpful for some of the questions people have about runaway conventions and things. This guy, knows it all.
Finish up here by making a few points regarding the runaway scenario. The claim that if we ever had a convention like this, it could be a constitutional convention which could do anything it wants, could careen out of control, take over the country, presumably come and kill all of your puppies, whatever. There are far, far more controls over this convention than there are over the runaway Congress. For example, when the states offer 34 applications on any one particular subject, the convention is limited to the scope of those applications. Secondly, when Congress exercised its mandatory duty to call the convention after having received 34 applications on one subject, it follows those applications and specifies the scope of the convention. The convention may not go beyond that. Each convention committee, each state delegation, is chosen by the state legislature in such manner as the state legislature shall direct. That means that each member of the convention is recallable by the state legislatures, a well-recognized prerogative of the states meeting in convention. They are also under instructions from the state legislature. This is a convention for the purpose of Amendment X. It's not for the convention of purpose of Amendment Y. You start talking about Amendment Y, we're going to call you home. If by some miraculous event the convention were to come up with an amendment not authorized, then Congress would have the right, in fact the duty, to refuse to specify a mode of ratification. And since Congress is an institutional rival of the convention, it'll have every motive to try to rein in the convention if the convention acts in any way which is impermissible. And then there is the requirement that not 1, not 4, not 14, but 38 states ratify any amendment proposed by the convention. Could the convention change the method of ratification? No. Because, as I've already said, the United States Supreme Court says that the convention is empowered by the Constitution and subject to its rules. And if all of that wasn't enough, I would like to remind you that there are other possibilities of lawsuits all along the line. Anything that the convention does that is even arguably legal can and will be challenged in the courts. And contrary to what you may have heard, the courts have been willing to accept Article 5 disputes, and there is a long line of court decisions that shed light on Article 5. So the real risks are not from the runaway convention. The real risks are that we won't have a convention. The state legislatures may not act, and the federal government may continue to careen out of control. The convention may deadlock, like, for example, the Yorktown Convention of 1777 did when they had a tie vote among the states. The convention may not act, and the United States Congress may continue to careen out of control. The convention may propose, but then the states refuse to ratify, and Congress continue out of control. Or liberal groups might very well sue and try to throw a monkey wrench into the convention with the same results. But we do have the obligation to act. Let me just suggest to you one possible vignette in closing here. Let's suppose that contrary to all expectations, the door were to open from the back. And in strode James Madison and John Dickinson. And after we all gasped and wondered how they got there, we all mobbed around them to talk to them. And several of us started complaining to them about what the federal government had become. That it had become a government that had snapped its powers, its scope of its powers a long time ago. That it had become a government that had burdened us with incredible debt. That it had become a government that often was oppressive and couldn't even balance its own budget. And when we outlined all those problems to Mr. Dickinson and Mr. Madison, what would be their response? Their response would be, well, have you used the procedure in Article 5 that we wrote into the Constitution for exactly that eventuality? And when we sheepishly admitted that, no, we hadn't, we'd allowed ourselves to be distracted by alarmists and quacks, and we'd never really done it. No doubt, they would look at us and say that the situation was our own fault. And they would be right.
The man is very wise. Yes?
I gotta tell you, as soon as I saw the word ALEC on the screen, I said to myself, oh no. ALEC has been known to bring in congressional representatives who meet in closed-door meetings with industry. Industry proposes the kinds of ideas they have to run away with power. And the congressional representatives in closed-door meetings agree that they're going to propose legislation that favors the industry. So, man, I have this knee-jerk reaction that happened so hard. As soon as I saw ALEC there, I'm wondering why would the American Legislative Executive Council even want a proposal about the
Yeah, you know,
Convention of States?
I can't speak to that. I just know he happened to give that speech in front of them. Maybe he was trying to convince them the way I am, but I honestly don't know.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Is the nightmare of the people. And this is how our government has been corrupted, by industry that meet with these people in closed-door meetings, and they propose legislation that we have no idea about. They make it sound pretty, like it's for something, when in fact it's against. And you read the titles of these bills, and it's so easy to be fooled unless you look at the print and you look at what it's about. So, I just hope that you have some kind of a, retort so that I can feel assured that it's not like an ALEC kind of.
Yeah, it's not associated with ALEC. I wish I could tell you more about that, and I can look into it, but I'm afraid I don't have much info there.
I just want to say something. Yeah, and I was thinking of letting them know that you might
Very well be taking on this area.
Yeah, so hi, for those who don't know me, I'm Dave Phelps. I met Lois a couple months ago. I'm looking into getting involved with Convention of States, taking on the district captain position. So I don't have an overwhelming specific knowledge on this yet, although I'm learning. But I do want to say, our federal government, is out of control, and we have very limited options. We've seen with COVID what the federal government can do. Our options are a civil war, taken to the streets, We have Convention of States, which is something our founding fathers in their wisdom, knowing, the First Amendment they gave us, beautiful things, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. They had wisdom. They relied on their godly counsel, It was wisdom that brought this Constitution to make it the best country we could have. These are one of the processes that they put in place for us because they had the forethought to see what could happen with evil men in control, This is what they gave us. We don't have 16 options. Now, if you look at these, the federal government, our Congress, is never going to act on this. Now, while sitting back there research, they have proposed 211 amendments last year. 211. And they're not for your benefit, I can guarantee you that. They'd like to repeal some, like the Second Amendment. They are lifers. And the only way to stop it, this is our best chance. Now, men are men, but there are restraints in this, Way more restraints, like you've heard, than what our federal government has, They can vote themselves raises in the middle of a recession. They can give themselves powers that are illegal to begin with. We have to take this seriously, because it's either that or it's taking up arms. And I think the Founding Fathers wanted this in place. In fact, I had the quote up there about George Washington, as opposed to a civil war, use the Constitution to hit them where we need to hit them. Term limits, fiscal restraints, these are things we can get behind. These are things we need. We can do it legally, without bloodshed, We have to have faith in our Constitution, faith in the system, That's just what I'm seeing. Go ahead, Dan.
Dave, how feasible is this in New York State? That we could become a delegate state?
As I said earlier, every state will be represented. Even if our state doesn't vote as one of the 34, we still go. So regardless, we would love to pass it in New York because that means more people, more of our representatives are in favor of it and understand it. But we need 34 states, and if New York doesn't happen to be one, it still happens. It happens, and we still get represented, and we still get a vote.
What should we be working for?
It's
Are we working for Pennsylvania or?
No, you know what? I'm involved in a bigger way because I'm on a state level and I learn about national things, and there are times I've made phone calls for other states to get people out to vote, literally in Pennsylvania and some of the other states. So we do other things that help each other, but there's plenty to do in New York, and I would say mainly it's to spread the word. Take a bunch of those cards, sign the petition, you'll get information. Your representative will know that you signed the petition. You can call them, you can email them, you can send them a note, you can ask other people. Sometimes we have something called Telepatriot where we make phone calls and we try to get everybody to, maybe you want to, everybody to call their senator, or maybe even another one that might be on the committee that we want to get moving. But you get the most out of your own people that you vote for. So that's.
Last question is that, what is the projected date for this?
I can't say there's a projected date. I think Mark Meckler, who's the head of it, I was listening to him speak recently, and I think he was using like a 3 to 5 year period. As I said, it could be accelerated by the great mess we're in, because I've never seen so much happen so quickly. We've practically doubled just in our district the number of people that have signed the petition, because everyone has just had it and looking for something to do beyond, just, we're all complaining about it, we need to do something.
It may depend on what the elections come out. So
Well, it's certainly,
if it
yeah.
goes south, then people are going to get annoyed. And usually anger is a good motivating factor.
Yeah, well, that's why, yes, that's true.
And if it goes good, then people are happy and you have more power to move it forward because you have people that you trust.
Yeah. And I'm going to, I'd love to take more questions, but I know we have another speaker who I'm very interested in listening to as well. So if you could catch me after the meeting and, take a card, give me, get in touch with me personally if you have a question that hasn't been resolved, and I'll try to find the answer for you.
Thank you. Let's hear it for Lois and Dave.